Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a journey, not through time in a clunky DeLorean, but through the very earth and stone of one of humanity's most enduring creations, the Great Wall of China. Close your eyes for a moment and picture yourself, not as a tourist snapping selfies, but as a silent observer, feeling the grit of ancient dust underfoot, hearing the distant thud of a rammer compacting earth, the low murmur of voices carried on the wind. You're not just looking at a wall. You're experiencing centuries of quiet, continuous effort. You're about to discover a story far richer and, frankly, a lot less dramatic than you might expect. Most people think of fierce battles and a single, unified construction effort, but the reality is much more nuanced. In fact, if you tried to walk its entire length today, well, let's just say you probably wouldn't survive the blisters. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're up for it, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always cool to see where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing on a windswept plain, the air thick with the scent of dry earth and distant cooking fires. It's not the imposing stone dragon you picture, but rather a series of fragmented earthen mounds, rudimentary palisades, and simple watchtowers. This is China, long before the name meant a unified empire. This is the Warring States period, a time roughly from the 5th century 2 to 21 BCE, when various independent states jostled for dominance, each with its own ambitions, its own armies, and, crucially, its own ideas about defense. You're witnessing the ancient beginnings of what would one day become a singular marvel, but right now, it's a patchwork quilt of local fortifications. Imagine you're a farmer, tilling your small plot of land near the border of, say, the state of Qi. Your rulers, ever anxious about incursions from the neighboring state of Ku or Yan, decide to build a wall. But it's not for conquering, it's purely for protection. You might be conscripted not into a grand imperial project, but into a local militia tasked with digging a ditch and piling up earth. You'd be using simple tools, baskets woven from reeds to carry soil, hoes to loosen the stubborn ground, and perhaps a wooden rammer to compact the layers. It's back-breaking work, sure, but it's for your village, your family. There's a certain practical, almost mundane piece to it. Historians still argue whether these early, fragmented walls were truly precursors to the later unified structure, or simply independent defensive measures. Was there a grand vision from the start, or did it simply evolve? These early walls were often quite literally just compacted earth, reinforced with layers of reeds or brushwood. Picture a giant, linear sandcastle built with sweat and grit. Some were more substantial, like the square city of the state of Shao, a fascinating little fortress designed to protect its northern borders. It wasn't about keeping everyone out forever, but about slowing down invaders, giving time for alarms to be raised, for villagers to take shelter. It was about creating a buffer zone, a gentle deterrent. Think of it less as a locked door and more as a very, very long, inconvenient speed bump. You can almost hear the generals grumbling, "Oh, another wall to get over. Can't we just send a strongly worded letter instead?" The sheer localness of these efforts is what strikes you. You don't see a vast, centrally planned operation. Instead, you see scattered communities, each trying to secure its little corner of the world. It's a testament to human ingenuity. Really, faced with a threat, you build, you adapt, you pile things up. It's the same instinct that makes you put a fence around your garden, only on a much, much larger scale. And here's a quirky little tidbit. Some of these early sections of wall were actually built curved or meandering, following natural terrain, like riverbanks or mountain ridges, which made them incredibly efficient in terms of labor. No need for fancy surveying equipment when the landscape does half the work for you. It's like nature was saying, "Here, let me give you a hand with that defensive perimeter, you tireless little humans." You watch as these humble walls rise, not with the roar of battle, but with the rhythmic grunt of labor, the soft rustle of basket against earth, and the quiet determination of people seeking a bit of security in a turbulent world. There's no grand fanfare, no imperial decrees echoing across the land, just the persistent, gradual, and ultimately peaceful accretion of earth and stone, laying the groundwork for something far more magnificent. You've seen the fractured landscape of the warring states, a mosaic of small, independent walls. Now, fast forward a few decades, and the air around you thrums with a new energy. The year is 221 BCE, and a seismic shift has occurred. The state of Qin, under the ruthless and visionary leadership of King Zhenghu, would soon declare himself Qin Shi Huang. The first emperor has finally unified all of China. The constant skirmishes, the endless rivalries, the localized anxieties that drove the earlier wall building, they're gone, vanished, replaced by a single colossal empire. This doesn't mean the need for defense disappears. However, far from it. The new empire, vast and still consolidating, faces threats from beyond. Its northern borders, nomadic tribes, particularly the Xiongnu, are a persistent concern. But Qin Shi Huang's approach isn't about protecting one small state from another. It's about defining the boundaries of an entire civilization. You witness the beginning of the first imperial walls, a project of unprecedented scale, yet still remarkably peaceful in its execution. There's no sound of clashing swords, only the rhythmic thud of rammers and the murmur of thousands of voices. Imagine you are one of the countless laborers brought in from across the newly unified lands. You're not fighting, you're building. Your tools are still relatively simple, but the organization is on a scale never before seen. Instead of isolated groups working on their own sections, you are part of a massive, centrally directed effort. The emperor's mandate is clear: connect the existing, fragmented walls of the former states of Qin, Zhao, and Yan, and extend them further. This isn't about building entirely new structures from scratch in most places, but rather a grand, ambitious act of consolidation. It's like someone finally decided to connect all your individual Wi-Fi networks into one giant, super-fast imperial internet. You see engineers, not warriors, poring over maps, devising routes that cleverly incorporate natural barriers. The existing sections, some built centuries earlier, are now being reinforced, heightened, and linked by new stretches of wall. It's a pragmatic approach. Why build an entirely new wall when a perfectly good, albeit slightly worn, one is already standing there? This is where the concept of the Great Wall truly begins to take shape, not as a single, continuous line built all at once, but as a deliberate fusion of earlier efforts. Historians still argue whether Qin Shi Huang's wall was truly continuous, or if there were significant gaps that were later filled in by subsequent dynasties. Was it a truly unbroken line, or more of a dotted one? The materials you see are still largely local, compacted earth, what they called hanktu, often mixed with gravel and sand, layered and tamped down with incredible force. In some areas, where stone was abundant, rough-hewn blocks might be used. You see watchtowers rising, not just for defense, but as communication hubs, smoke signals by day, fires by night, sending messages across hundreds of miles in remarkably short periods. Imagine trying to explain Twitter to a Qin Dynasty soldier. So, you light a fire, and everyone across the empire knows what you had for breakfast. The quirky tidbit here is that despite the emperor's fearsome reputation, much of this wall building was handled by regular citizens and conscripted soldiers during peacetime, not slaves or prisoners, at least not exclusively. It was considered a civic duty, a contribution to the new, stable empire. Of course, the work was grueling and conditions were harsh, but it wasn't a death sentence. You might grumble about your aching back and the monotonous diet of millet porridge, but you wouldn't be fearing for your life. It was simply the emperor's grand construction project, a way to keep idle hands busy and create a physical manifestation of unity. A little like a mandatory empire-wide DIY project, just with more dirt and fewer trips to the hardware store. You watch as sections slowly merge, as watchtowers punctuate the horizon, and as the outline of something truly monumental begins to emerge. It's a silent testament to the raw power of centralized authority, not for conquest, but for the peaceful demarcation and protection of a newly forged identity. You've witnessed the birth of the Great Wall's imperial ambition under the Qin, a period of unification and grand consolidation. Now, centuries roll by, and the landscape subtly shifts again. The Qin dynasty, for all its power, was short-lived, collapsing under the weight of its own strictness. In its place rises the Han dynasty, an era that would last for over 4 centuries. From 206 BCE to 220 CE, this new dynasty, while still valuing defense, had a far more pragmatic and expansive vision for the wall. You are now seeing the wall's westward push under the Han emperors, particularly Emperor Wu. The wall wasn't just about keeping nomads out. It was about opening up new avenues for prosperity. Imagine the vast, empty stretches of the Hexi corridor, a narrow sliver of land sandwiched between mountains and desert, the gateway to the west. This was the lifeline of the burgeoning Silk Road, a network of trade routes that would link China with Central Asia, India, and even the distant Roman Empire. The wall's primary purpose here was not to repel invading armies in pitched battles, but to protect merchants, caravans, and diplomatic envoys from opportunistic bandits and smaller raiding parties. It was a security fence for a global highway, a sort of ancient, really long, slightly dusty border patrol checkpoint. You see the construction methods evolve, while rammed earth remains prevalent, especially in the western desert regions, where stone is scarce. There's a greater emphasis on watchtowers, beacon towers, and garrison outposts. These aren't just defensive structures. They're essential infrastructure for trade. They provide rest stops, water, and protection for travelers. Imagine a weary merchant leading his camels laden with silk and spices, spotting a beacon tower. On the horizon, a sign of safety, a place to rest, perhaps even a cup of tea. It's a softer power projection, a subtle assertion of control and order along a vital economic artery. Historians still argue whether the primary motivation for Han wall building was purely defensive or more focused on controlling and facilitating trade. Was it a shield or a corridor? The daily life you observe along these new western sections is different from the Eastern Front. Here, you see a blend of military personnel and a growing civilian population. Soldiers aren't just patrolling. They're farming, raising livestock, and sometimes even participating in small-scale trade themselves. This integration of military and civilian life was a hallmark of Han frontier policy. It was about creating stable, self-sufficient communities along the wall, not just isolated military garrisons. It's almost as if the Han emperors realized that a good defense isn't just about walls, but about having happy, well-fed people living behind them. A quirky tidbit: some Han Dynasty watchtowers in the desert used bundled reeds and wooden planks as core material for rammed earth, making them surprisingly resilient against erosion in the harsh environment. They basically built walls out of giant Lincoln logs. You might even see evidence of the diplomatic efforts that accompanied this expansion. Treaties were signed, alliances formed, and often princesses were sent as brides to nomadic chiefs, all part of a complex web of tribute and harmony. The wall, in this context, wasn't just a physical barrier. It was a symbol of Chinese power and a framework within which these often uneasy diplomatic dances could occur. It was a statement: here is our border. Let us trade, but understand who's in charge. As you watch the Han Empire's borders expand, pushing the wall further into the desolate, uninspiring landscapes of the West, you feel a sense of purpose. This isn't about desperate defense, but about strategic growth, about extending the reach of a flourishing empire through commerce and influence. The wall becomes less a testament to fear and more a monument to ambition and the quiet, persistent drive for connection. You've journeyed through the Han Dynasty's era of westward expansion, witnessing the wall transform into a protective arm for the Silk Road. Now, as the centuries continue their relentless march, you find yourself in a fascinating, often overlooked period of Chinese history, the Northern and Southern dynasties, 420 to 589 CE. This was a time of significant political fragmentation following the fall of the Han, but it was also a crucible of cultural exchange, and surprisingly, a period of continued, albeit localized, wall construction, particularly by the Northern Wei dynasty. Imagine standing in a snow-dusted landscape somewhere in what is now Shaanxi province. The air is crisp, and you see not a unified imperial force, but groups of people with distinct non-Han features, perhaps braided hair and different styles of dress, working alongside Han Chinese laborers. These are the people of the Northern Wei, a dynasty founded by the Tuoba, a nomadic Xianbai people from the north. They had conquered much of northern China, establishing their own powerful state. And here's where it gets interesting. Despite their nomadic roots, they quickly embraced Chinese governance, culture, and yes, even the very Chinese tradition of wall building. Their construction efforts weren't about grand, sweeping extensions of the existing Great Wall, but rather focused on strengthening specific strategic points and building new, shorter defensive lines to protect their new settled territories from other nomadic groups further north. It was less about keeping out barbarians in general, and more about securing their own specific borders against rival tribal confederations. You might see sections of stone wall being laid, more robust than the earlier rammed earth, a reflection of both available materials and evolving military threats. It's like they inherited a fantastic old house and decided to put in some modern security systems, specifically around the back door. The cultural exchange you witness is profound. The Northern Wei rulers weren't just building walls, they were actively adopting Chinese customs, language, and administrative practices. This included their approach to infrastructure. The wall, for them, became a symbol not of keeping out, but of establishing a settled, civilized identity. It was a tangible expression of their integration into the Chinese sphere. Historians still argue whether the Northern Wei's wall building was primarily a strategic military decision or a conscious effort to legitimize their rule by adopting Han administrative practices and symbols. Was it a necessity or a statement? A quirky tidbit from this era is the use of slave labor from conquered populations in some sections of the wall. While the Han largely relied on conscripted citizens, the Northern Wei, being a conquest dynasty, sometimes employed captured peoples, adding a different, albeit darker, facet to the human effort involved. You might see a mix of free laborers and those working under duress, all contributing to the same physical structure. It's a reminder that while the overall theme of wall building was peaceful demarcation, the methods employed could vary. You observe the meticulous process of laying stone, of fitting blocks together, of constructing watchtowers that echo the design principles of earlier Chinese dynasties. There's a quiet determination in the air, a sense of building for permanence, even in a politically turbulent era. The wall, in this context, becomes a silent witness to a complex historical process, a nomadic people settling down, embracing an agricultural civilization, and defending their new home using the very methods of those they had conquered. As you stand amidst these Northern Wei fortifications, you realize that the Great Wall's story is never simple, never just one thing. It's a continuous narrative of adaptation, integration, and the persistent human drive to define boundaries, sometimes for protection, sometimes for identity, and often for both. You've seen the Northern Wei, a nomadic dynasty, build walls as they integrated into the tapestry of Chinese civilization. Now, the centuries continue to flow like a slow river, and you arrive at the dawn of a new unified era, the Sui dynasty, 581 to 618 CE. After centuries of fragmentation following the Han, China is once again brought under a single rule, this time by Emperor Wen and later his son, Emperor Yang. And with this reunification comes a renewed, intense focus on the Great Wall, though with a distinct purpose: repair and reconstruction. Imagine standing at a section of the wall that has fallen into disrepair. Earth has eroded, stones have tumbled, and watchtowers stand as crumbling skeletons against the sky. The Sui emperors, having just painstakingly reunified a fractured land, understood the symbolic and strategic importance of the northern defenses. Their goal wasn't to extend the wall dramatically into new territories, but to restore and secure what was already there. You hear the sounds of busy construction, but it's less about pioneering new routes and more about meticulous, often frantic efforts to mend, reinforce, and reconnect. It's like buying a beautiful but slightly dilapidated historic home and embarking on a massive renovation project. The Sui dynasty is famous for its colossal construction projects, including the Grand Canal, and the Great Wall was no exception. Records speak of hundreds of thousands, even millions, of laborers being conscripted for wall work. While these numbers are often debated by historians, it paints a picture of immense human effort. You see vast quantities of earth being moved, stones being quarried, and bricks being fired. The work is physically demanding, yet it's not driven by immediate warfare, but by a long-term vision of stability and defense against renewed threats from nomadic groups like the Eastern Turks. It's a preventive measure, a declaration of strength through solid infrastructure. Historians still argue whether the scale of the Tsuai's wall projects contributed significantly to the dynasty's relatively short lifespan due to the immense strain on resources and manpower. Was it a strategic necessity or an imperial overreach? You observe a different kind of intensity here. The Sui, having just unified the empire, were keen to project an image of power and order. The wall, meticulously restored and strengthened, was a tangible symbol of this renewed might. You might see sections where old rammed earth is being capped with new brickwork, or crumbling watchtowers being painstakingly rebuilt to their former glory, complete with fresh beacon signal systems. It's a colossal task of maintenance and improvement, ensuring that the existing structure could fulfill its defensive purpose. A quirky tidbit is the recorded use of a sticky rice and lime mixture as a mortar in some sections during this period, which proved incredibly durable and resistant to water, almost like an ancient superglue for bricks. Talk about a secret ingredient. The daily scene is one of organized labor. Foremen direct teams, supplies are ferried to the construction sites, and the rhythmic sound of ramming and chiseling fills the air. There's a pragmatic necessity to it, a clear understanding that a strong border meant a stable interior. You might hear the grumbling of laborers, but also the sense of contributing to a grand imperial project that promised peace and security for future generations. It's a collective effort of restoration, driven by the desire to safeguard the newly re-established unity that as you stand amidst the bustling repair efforts of the Sui dynasty, you feel the weight of history being resecured, brick by painstaking brick. The wall, once fragmented and decaying, is being brought back to life, not for aggressive expansion, but as a steadfast guardian of a reunified empire, a monument to peaceful preservation. You've witnessed the Sui dynasty's monumental efforts to patch and restore the Great Wall, solidifying a newly reunified China. Now, as the wheel of time turns, you glide into one of the most glorious and expansive periods of Chinese history, the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907 CE. And here's where the story of the Great Wall takes an intriguing, almost counterintuitive turn. You are about to explore a less walled approach. Imagine the imperial court in Chang'an, modern-day Xi'an, the dazzling capital of the Tangs. This is an era of unparalleled cultural brilliance, economic prosperity, and military strength. The empire stretches far and wide, its influence extending deep into Central Asia. You don't see the frantic, large-scale wall building of earlier dynasties. Instead, you see bustling trade, vibrant diplomatic exchanges, and a confident, outward-looking attitude. It's as if the Tang emperors looked at the formidable northern barrier and thought, do we really need to keep building this thing? Or can we just be incredibly good at diplomacy and strategic offense? The Tang military strategy was quite different. Rather than relying primarily on static defenses, they favored a more dynamic approach, offensive military strategies and diplomacy. They believed in taking the fight to their enemies, launching preemptive campaigns, and forming alliances with various nomadic tribes to play them against each other. It's like they decided that instead of building a taller fence, they'd just make sure their guard dogs were really well trained and prone to going on long, adventurous walks. Historians still argue whether the Tang's reduced emphasis on wall construction was due to genuine military superiority or a shift in geopolitical priorities that made static defense less critical. Was it strength or strategy? You might still see some localized fortifications, especially around strategically important mountain passes or trade routes, but these are generally smaller, more tactical constructions, not the grand, continuous barriers of previous eras. The emphasis shifts from a physical wall to a human wall, well-trained armies, strong cavalry units, and a sophisticated network of frontier garrisons that could project power outward. This was a period of incredible innovation in weaponry and military organization, making the Tang armies formidable forces that often operated far beyond traditional Chinese borders. The daily life you observe during the Tang is one of confidence and openness. Merchants from distant lands, Persia, Arabia, even Byzantium, are freely traversing the empire, their goods flowing along the Silk Road, which the Tang meticulously protected through military might and diplomatic alliances, not primarily by a continuous wall. You see cosmopolitan cities brimming with foreign visitors, exotic goods, and new ideas. It's a stark contrast to the earlier, more insular periods of wall building. A quirky tidbit from this era: Ming Dynasty frontier poems often speak of the vast, open spaces of the borderlands, celebrating the bravery of solitary soldiers rather than the impregnability of defensive structures. The ideal soldier wasn't someone manning a wall, but a horseman ranging far across the steppes. It truly reflects a different mindset, one less focused on physical barriers. Imagine a general saying, "Why build a wall when we can just send our best poets to confuse the enemy with metaphors?" As you witness the Tang Dynasty in its full glory, you understand that the story of the Great Wall isn't just about constant construction and about the fluid relationship between an empire and its perceived threats. For the Tang, the strength of the empire lay not in an unbreachable barrier, but in its dynamic power and its ability to engage with the world on its own terms. You've just experienced the grandeur of the Tang Dynasty, an era where the emphasis on physical walls diminished in favor of military projection and open diplomacy. Now, as time progresses, you find yourself in a new, more challenging period for China. The Song Dynasty, 962-1279 CE. This era is marked by brilliant cultural achievements and economic prosperity. Yet militarily, it faced persistent pressure from powerful northern nomadic groups. This led to a significant shift in defensive strategies, away from the grand, continuous northern wall. Imagine standing not on a distant, windswept frontier, but closer to the heartland, perhaps along a major river, like the Yellow River. The air hums with the sound of commerce and scholarly debate, yet there's an underlying tension, a sense of vulnerability. The Song Empire, despite its wealth and sophisticated culture, had lost significant northern territories to formidable non-Han states, primarily the Liaohitan and later the Jin-Jurchen dynasties. These powerful neighbors controlled much of the traditional Great Wall lines. So, what do you do when your grand defensive barrier is now largely in enemy hands? You adapt. The Song dynasty's approach to defense was pragmatic and introspective. Instead of attempting to reclaim and rebuild a continuous Great Wall, which was logistically and militarily impossible given the strength of their northern rivals, they focused on internal river defenses and strategic garrisons. You see the construction of elaborate fortresses at key river crossings, mountain passes, and along vital transportation routes. These aren't long, linear walls, but rather strong, independent defensive complexes designed to slow down invasions and protect the Song heartland. It's like discovering your old security fence is now on your neighbor's property. So you decide to reinforce your own house with a really sturdy front door and some high-tech alarm systems. You witness innovative military engineering, the development of gunpowder, weapons, complex siege machinery, and sophisticated signaling systems within these smaller, more concentrated defensive zones. The Song military was highly advanced, but its strategy was fundamentally reactive and defensive, aimed at holding key points and leveraging their superior logistics and population density. Historians still argue whether the Song's defensive strategy was a pragmatic adaptation to new geopolitical realities or a missed opportunity to project power and reclaim lost territories. Was it cautious wisdom or strategic timidity? The daily life you observe is one of resilience. While the north was often a contested zone, the Song heartland thrived. Farmers tilled their fields, artisans crafted exquisite goods, and scholars pursued knowledge. The military installations you see are populated by dedicated soldiers, but they are clearly part of a more localized, pinpointed defense rather than an all-encompassing border. There's a sense of professionalism, but also perhaps a wistful look north towards the lands that were once part of the empire. A quirky tidbit from this era is the reliance on extensive intelligence gathering and diplomacy, often involving generous payments or tribute to the northern states, essentially buying peace. While not a physical wall, these payments served a similar function to create a buffer and deter conflict. Imagine the emperors sighing as they wrote out massive checks, thinking, well, it's cheaper than building another 500 miles of wall, I suppose. As you observe the Song dynasty, you understand that the Great Wall is not just a physical entity, but a concept that shifts and adapts with the times. For the Song, defense meant not a single continuous barrier, but a resilient network of strongholds and a sophisticated, albeit expensive, diplomatic approach to managing powerful neighbors. You've just seen the Song dynasty's pragmatic shift to internal river defenses, a departure from the continuous northern wall. Now, as the historical narrative unfolds, you find yourself on the other side of that divide, observing the very powers that pressured the Song, the Liao and Jin dynasties. These formidable northern powers, of Khitan and Jurchen origin, respectively, weren't just invaders. They were empire builders in their own right, and they too understood the need for frontier fortifications. Imagine standing on a cold, wind-swept plain further north than any previous wall section you've encountered. The landscape is vast and open, dotted with hardy steppe grasses. You see laborers, some of whom might be Han Chinese captives or conscripts, working under the direction of Khitan or Jurchen overseers. These dynasties, despite their nomadic heritage, quickly recognized the strategic value of static defenses as they settled down and established agricultural economies. They weren't building the Great Wall, but their great walls, often in parallel to or even incorporating sections of earlier Chinese fortifications. It's like your neighbor building their own fence right next to yours, possibly even using some of your old fence posts. The Liao dynasty, 907 to 1125 CE, established by the Khitan people, controlled vast territories, including parts of what is now Inner Mongolia and northeast China. They faced threats from other nomadic groups and from the Song dynasty, even as they extracted tribute from them. You observe their construction efforts, primarily long, linear earthen walls, sometimes reinforced with stone. These walls were designed to protect their agricultural heartlands, mark their territorial boundaries, and control the movement of goods and people. It wasn't about keeping out everyone, but about regulating the flow, much like a modern border checkpoint system, albeit a very, very long one. Then came the Jin dynasty, 1115 to 1234 CE, founded by the Jurchens, who eventually conquered the Liao and pushed the Song even further south. The Jin, too, embarked on significant wall-building projects. Their most notable effort, sometimes referred to as the Jin Wall, stretched for hundreds of miles across what is now northeastern China and Inner Mongolia. You might see more sophisticated techniques here, including the use of brick and mortar and more strategically placed watchtowers. Their walls served a dual purpose: to defend against nomadic tribes to their north and to secure their frontier. With the Southern Song, historians still argue whether these northern dynasties' walls were simply imitations of Chinese defensive strategies or independent innovations driven by similar geopolitical needs. Was it mimicry or convergence? The daily life around these walls would have been robust and multi-ethnic. You'd see Khitan and Jurchen soldiers patrolling, Han Chinese farmers tending their fields in the shadow of the fortifications, and perhaps even some Uyghur or Tangut merchants passing through designated gates. There was a practicality to it all. These walls were integrated into the landscape, becoming part of the daily rhythm of life on the frontier. A quirky tidbit from this period is that some sections of the Jin Wall were built with a particular emphasis on trapping cavalry, incorporating wide, deep ditches in front of the wall to bog down mounted attackers. It's like they thought, we'll build a wall, and then we'll add a supersized moat just for their horses. That'll show 'em. As you observe these northern defensive lines, you gain a deeper appreciation for the concept of walls as a universal human response to perceived threats and the desire for order. The Liao and Jin, despite being seen as outsiders by the Han Chinese, demonstrated that the impulse to build and defend boundaries was not exclusive to any one culture, but a recurring theme across the vast tapestry of ancient China. You've just explored the impressive, albeit distinct, wall-building efforts of the Liao and Jin dynasties, realizing that the impulse to fortify wasn't exclusive to the Han Chinese. Now, prepare for another dramatic shift in the story, as the familiar landscape of China undergoes a radical transformation. You are entering the era of the Yuan dynasty, 1271 to 1368 CE, a period of Mongol rule that brought the construction of the Great Wall to an almost complete pause. Imagine the vastness of the Mongol Empire, from the steppes of Central Asia across Russia into Eastern Europe and encompassing all of China. This was an empire unlike any before it. Genghis Khan and his successors, through sheer military prowess and an unparalleled cavalry force, had created the largest contiguous land empire in history. Suddenly, the traditional northern threat to China vanished, because the threat was now the ruler. You see the wall not as an active construction site, but as a silent, often decaying, relic of a bygone era. It's like having the world's most secure safe, only to find out you own the entire bank. The Mongol rulers of the Yuan dynasty, primarily Kublai Khan, established a new capital in Dadu, modern-day Beijing. Their philosophy was one of open borders, or rather, borders that stretched to the ends of their vast dominion. Why would you build a wall to keep out nomads when you are the nomads and you rule everyone? The very concept of a defensive barrier along China's traditional northern frontier became largely irrelevant to them. Their control extended far beyond the wall, rendering traditional border defenses less critical. You see caravans moving freely across the vast northern steppes, without the former concerns of raiding parties being funneled through specific gates or slowed by fortifications. Their military strategy was based on mobility, shock cavalry, and maintaining garrisons across their enormous empire, not on static defenses. They viewed the Great Wall as an antiquated relic, a symbol of a fragmented, less powerful China. While they might have used some existing sections of the wall for local administration or as watchtowers for internal communication, there was no imperial initiative for large-scale repair or new construction. It simply wasn't part of their worldview. Historians still argue whether the Yuan's neglect of the Great Wall was a testament to their military dominance, or a practical recognition that a unified, vast empire made such a linear defense obsolete. Was it arrogance or efficiency? The daily life you observe is profoundly different. You see a vibrant, multi-ethnic society with Mongols, Han Chinese, Uyghurs, Persians, and Europeans like Marco Polo interacting in the bustling cities. The wall, if you encounter it, might be crumbling in places, used by local farmers as a source of stone, or simply bypassed as trade routes flowed freely. The frontier, once a tightly controlled zone, became a more fluid space. A quirky tidbit from this period is that while the Mongols didn't build new walls, they meticulously maintained and expanded the Grand Canal, a testament to their focus on internal logistics and communication across their vast empire. It's almost as if they said, walls, nah, but a really good waterway for our boats. Now that's a project worth investing in. As you stand in the era of the Yuan, looking at the decaying Great Wall, you grasp a fundamental truth. The wall's relevance was entirely dependent on the political and military landscape of China. Under Mongol rule, a unified empire stretching far beyond the traditional Chinese borders rendered this immense defensive structure temporarily obsolete, marking a peaceful yet significant pause in its millennial-long construction. You've just witnessed the remarkable pause in wall construction during the Yuan dynasty, a period where the vast Mongol Empire rendered the Great Wall largely obsolete. But empires rise and fall, and the Yuan's rule, for all its breadth, eventually waned. Now, you're about to experience a true resurgence, a period of unparalleled effort and transformation for the Great Wall, the Ming Dynasty, 1368 to 1644 CE. This is where you see the wall's grand renewal, shaping it into the iconic structure recognized globally today. Imagine the atmosphere. The Ming Dynasty was founded by Zhu Yuanzhang, a peasant leader who drove out the Mongols. This wasn't just a change in leadership. It was a profound cultural and strategic shift. The Ming emperors, having experienced centuries of northern threats, first from the Jurchen Jin and then the all-encompassing Mongol Yuan, developed a deep-seated apprehension about their northern border. They viewed the Great Wall not as an outdated relic, but as a vital, indeed existential, defense. You sense a national imperative, a quiet determination to secure the Han Chinese heartland once and for all. What you witness now is truly monumental. Unlike previous dynasties that often repaired existing sections or built localized segments, the Ming embarked on a sustained, centuries-long project to build a virtually continuous, incredibly robust defensive line from the Bohai Sea in the east to the Gobi Desert in the west. This wasn't about connecting scattered patches. It was about creating a formidable, integrated system. You see massive construction efforts in full swing, not in one or two places, but across thousands of miles. It's like the entire nation decided, right? No more dilly-dallying. We're building the wall, and we're building it properly this time. The Ming's approach was meticulous. They didn't just build walls, they built an entire defensive infrastructure. You see towering watchtowers, often 2 stories high, capable of housing garrisons and storing supplies. You see barracks, command centers, and elaborate communication systems involving beacon fires and flags. The construction was not just about height and thickness, but about strategic depth. They built multiple lines of walls in some areas, creating complex defensive networks. Historians still argue whether the Ming's extensive wall building was an ultimately successful defense strategy or a massive diversion of resources that could have been better spent elsewhere. Was it a triumph of engineering or a strategic folly? The daily life around these Ming wall sections is one of constant activity. Soldiers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen work side by side. The work is hard, often under challenging environmental conditions, from arid deserts to rugged mountains. But there's a different underlying energy compared to the earlier, more fragmented efforts. This is a unified vision, a national undertaking. You might hear the rhythmic chants of laborers, the clang of tools, and the lowing of oxen pulling carts. Laden with materials, it's a symphony of human effort. A quirky tidbit from this period is the Ming's sophisticated use of brick kilns along the wall. They would build temporary kilns near the construction sites, firing millions upon millions of bricks on site to reduce the logistical nightmare of transporting heavy materials over vast distances. It's like having a portable factory that churns out the exact building blocks you need, right where you need them. Oh, need another million bricks? Just fire up the old clay oven over there. As you observe the Ming Dynasty's relentless and unprecedented efforts, you realize that this is the epoch that truly defined the Great Wall in popular imagination. It was a centuries-long, largely peaceful endeavor of immense scale, driven by a deep-seated desire for security and a fierce determination to protect the newly restored Chinese identity. The Ming Wall stands as a testament to the power of sustained national will. You've just witnessed the monumental ambition of the Ming Dynasty, turning the Great Wall into the formidable structure we largely recognize today. Now, let's zoom in past the grand vision and delve into the gritty reality of Ming construction techniques and tools. You'll discover the sheer ingenuity and human effort that went into building this colossal barrier. Imagine standing right beside a team of laborers, perhaps somewhere rugged, like the Mutianyu section, where the wall snakes over steep mountain ridges. The air is filled with the rhythmic thump of ramming, the chipping sound of chisels, and the shouts of foremen. Unlike the earlier rammed earth walls, the Ming Dynasty extensively used bricks and cut stone, particularly in the eastern, more heavily trafficked and strategically vital sections. This marked a significant leap in durability and engineering. It's like upgrading from a sandcastle to a reinforced concrete bunker. But without any actual concrete, obviously. You'd see massive quantities of raw materials being moved. Stones, quarried from nearby mountains, are cut and shaped by skilled masons. You might observe a team of oxen straining against their yokes, pulling heavy carts laden with these cut blocks up steep inclines. Where the terrain was too challenging for carts, you'd see human chains, laborers passing stones hand to hand, or ingenious pulley systems devised to hoist materials up cliffs. It was a logistical marvel, a giant slow-motion ballet of brute force and clever mechanics. And then there were the bricks, millions, if not billions, of bricks. As you saw in the previous section, the Ming perfected the art of firing bricks on site, building temporary kilns along the wall's path. You can almost feel the heat radiating from these ancient ovens, see the smoke curling into the sky. These bricks, often stamped with the names of the kill and the supervising official, were incredibly durable, offering superior resistance to erosion and attack compared to raw earth. The consistency in size and quality was remarkable, allowing for precise, strong construction. Historians still argue whether the uniformity of Ming bricks was primarily for structural integrity or for ease of assembly by less skilled laborers. Was it for strength or speed? The construction techniques were sophisticated for their time. You'd see teams applying layers of lime mortar, often mixed with sticky rice flour, as we mentioned earlier, creating an incredibly strong bond between bricks and stones. This mixture wasn't just glue. It added significant resistance to water and frost, ensuring the wall's longevity. Imagine trying to get that recipe just right with no fancy measuring cups of elbow grease. For tools, imagine simple but effective implements, picks and shovels for excavation, hammers and chisels for shaping stone. wooden ramming tools for compacting earth foundations, and baskets for carrying materials. The sheer scale was achieved not through advanced machinery, but through an immense deployment of organized human labor and clever, practical engineering solutions. You might even see basic scaffolding made from timber and ropes, allowing workers to build higher sections. A quirky tidbit is the use of roller technology for compacting rammed earth sections. While often overshadowed by the brick sections, vast parts of the Ming Wall, especially in the west, were still built with rammed earth, but using massive stone rollers to achieve incredible density and strength. Ancient steamroller, just without the steam, as you stand amidst the sounds and sights of Ming construction, you gain a profound appreciation for the human element. It was a testament to patience, perseverance, and collective effort. Every stone laid, every brick cemented, was a small, peaceful act of building, contributing to a monumental structure that was both a physical barrier and a symbol of national will. You've just peered into the intricate world of Ming construction, seeing the ingenious techniques and sheer human effort that forged the wall. Now, let's shift our perspective. Step away from the direct act of building and immerse yourself in everyday life on the wall, or rather, the bustling, surprisingly peaceful existence of the people who lived near and on this immense structure. Imagine the atmosphere, not just of military vigilance, but of routine, of community. You are no longer just an observer of construction, but a silent visitor to the small settlements that sprang up around watchtowers, garrisons, and strategic passes. The wall wasn't a desolate, empty line. You see soldiers, yes, but also farmers, merchants, families, and even artisans going about their daily lives. For the soldiers stationed on the wall, life was largely one of routine rather than constant combat. Their primary duties involved patrolling, maintaining the wall, keeping watch for smoke signals, the ancient equivalent of a text message, just a lot slower to type out, and ensuring the beacon system was operational. They might spend their days mending eroded sections, clearing debris, or practicing drills. The threat of large-scale invasion was always present, but daily life was often characterized by long periods of peaceful boredom, punctuated by moments of intense, but often short-lived, alarm. You might hear the clatter of dice from a game being played in a watchtower, or the murmur of stories being told around a shared meal. Beyond the soldiers, you'd see a civilian population. Farmers tilled fields right up to the base of the wall, their lives intertwined with the presence of the massive barrier. The wall, for them, represented security. It allowed them to plant their crops and raise their families with a greater sense of safety than in earlier, more volatile times. They might even trade with the soldiers, supplying fresh produce or handmade goods in exchange for small coins or surplus rations. It was a symbiotic relationship, a miniature economy thriving in the shadow of the colossal stone. You might also spot small markets that formed at key passes where local goods were exchanged, and sometimes regulated trade with nomadic tribes from beyond the wall occurred. While the wall was a barrier, it wasn't entirely impermeable. Designated gates and passes allowed for controlled movement, facilitating a level of commerce and cultural exchange that added to the richness of frontier life. Historians still argue whether the wall fostered greater integration or separation. between the Han Chinese and various nomadic groups along the border? Did it divide or connect? A quirky tidbit from the daily life on the wall relates to hygiene. Imagine the challenges of waste disposal for hundreds of thousands of people over centuries. Ingenious internal chutes for disposing of refuse, or even small, designated latrine areas, reflecting a pragmatic approach to living within confined spaces for long periods. It's like they thought, well, if we're going to build a super long wall, we might as well make sure it doesn't smell too bad, right? As you observe the routines of these communities, you realize the Great Wall was more than just a military fortification. It was a catalyst for settlement, a framework for daily existence, and a quiet witness to countless generations living out their lives in its protective shadow. It was a place where peace, often hard-won, became the norm, allowing for the slow, persistent rhythm of life to flourish. You've just seen the everyday rhythms of life on and around the wall, a testament to its role in fostering settled communities. Now, let's explore another crucial facet of the wall's existence, one that goes beyond mere defense. Its profound role in facilitating trade and communication. You'll discover how the wall, far from being just a barrier, became a backbone. For exchange, imagine standing at one of the Ming Dynasty's main passes, like Shanhaiguan, where the wall meets the sea, or Jiawuguan, the first and greatest pass under heaven in the far west. These weren't just fortified gateways. They were bustling hubs, vibrant arteries of commerce. You see not only soldiers, but also merchants, their caravans laden with goods, waiting to pass through. Conduit, channeling trade rather than completely shutting it down. It's like a very, very long, ancient customs checkpoint. The wall facilitated internal trade by creating secure corridors. Within its protective shadow, goods could move with relative safety from bandits and local skirmishes. Imagine farmers bringing their produce to market, artisans transporting their crafts, or regional specialties being exchanged across different provinces. The watchtowers and garrisons that dotted the wall provided security, rest stops, and logistical support for these internal movements, ensuring that the flow of goods within the empire was relatively unimpeded. This allowed for greater economic integration and prosperity within the Ming realm, beyond internal trade. The wall also played a role in controlled external trade. While the Ming policy could be restrictive, designated passes allowed for interaction and commerce with nomadic tribes and other foreign entities. This wasn't always seamless, but it was a regulated system. You might see furs, horses, and other goods from the steppes being exchanged for Chinese silk, tea, and porcelain. These exchanges, though sometimes tense, were often peaceful, driven by mutual economic benefit. Historians still argue whether the wall's primary impact on trade was to restrict it, thereby controlling foreign influence, or to channel and secure it for imperial benefit. Did it hinder or facilitate commerce? Crucially, the wall was also a vast, sophisticated communication network. Imagine watching a system of smoke signals rise into the sky by day, or the flickering glow of beacon fires by night, carrying messages across hundreds of miles in a matter of hours. This was far more efficient than relying on horseback messengers alone. News of troop movements, bandit raids, or even imperial decrees could be transmitted rapidly from one end of the empire to the other. These signals weren't just for military alerts. They also communicated information vital for trade, such as the safe passage of caravans or the presence of specific goods. A quirky tidbit is that the specific patterns of smoke puffs or fire flashes could convey different messages, almost like an ancient Morse code, pre-programmed for various scenarios. 2 puffs means enemy sighted, but 3 puffs means enemy sighted, and they brought snacks. The wall's physical presence, therefore, wasn't just about defense, it was about order. It imposed a structure on the vast frontier, making it safer for people and goods to move, both within China and fucking in a controlled manner across its borders. It became an integral part of the empire's economic and administrative nervous system. As you stand by the wall's ancient passes, you realize that this monumental structure, built through peaceful, sustained effort, was a crucial enabler of connection, allowing the arteries of trade and communication to flow, ensuring the economic health and internal cohesion of a vast empire. You've just explored how the Great Wall functioned as a vital conduit for trade and communication, an economic artery for the empire. Now, as the centuries once again turn, you move past the Ming's grand design and into a period of gradual change, the Qing Dynasty, 1644 to 1912 CE. This is where you witness the wall's eventual decline and preservation efforts begin. A shift from active defense to historical monument. Imagine the atmosphere in the early Qing. The new rulers are the Manchus, another group from beyond the traditional Ming frontier who swept into China and established their own dynasty. Much like the Mongols before them, their vast empire extended far beyond the traditional Great Wall line, encompassing Manchuria, Mongolia, and beyond. So, the wall, built with such immense effort by the Ming to keep out northern invaders, now found itself firmly within the new empire's borders. It's like building an impenetrable fence around your property, only to discover you've just bought the entire neighborhood. For the early Qing emperors, the Great Wall largely lost its primary strategic military purpose. Their power extended far north, and their military focus was on internal control and expansion into Central Asia, not on defending against threats from within their own sprawling domain. While some garrisons might have remained to control local bandits or collect customs at passes, there was no longer a need for constant, large-scale maintenance or new construction. You see sections of the wall gradually falling into disrepair, stones crumbling, vegetation growing over watchtowers, and sections being reused for local construction. The Qing emperors, particularly those in the early and mid-dynasty, like Kangxi and Qialong, understood the wall's symbolic value, but they rarely invested in its comprehensive upkeep as a defensive structure. Instead, their strategic approach focused on maintaining a strong cavalry, developing sophisticated logistics, and, crucially, forming alliances with various nomadic groups, integrating them into the Qing imperial system. This was a soft power approach that rendered the rigid physical barrier less necessary. Historians still argue whether the Qing's neglect of the Great Wall was a sign of their imperial confidence or a misjudgment that left the empire vulnerable to later external pressures. Was it strategic or complacent? The daily life around the wall becomes less about active military vigilance and more about the quiet continuation of civilian life. Farmers still work their fields, and villagers might use parts of the wall as pathways or sources of building materials. Some passes, especially those near major roads, would remain active for trade and travel, but their defensive function would diminish. A quirky tidbit from the Qing era is that some sections of the wall became popular destinations for scholars and poets who would travel to them to write verses, admire the rugged scenery, and reflect on the rise and fall of dynasties. It started transforming from a military fortification into a cultural landmark even then. Imagine poets trying to capture the feeling of centuries of human toil in a few elegant lines, perhaps while leaning against a crumbling battleground. As the Qing dynasty progressed and the empire faced new threats from maritime powers in the 19th century, the Great Wall became even less relevant as a border defense. Its strategic importance continued to wane, and it largely receded into the background of national consciousness, becoming a forgotten monument for many. It wasn't until the 20th century, with growing nationalism and a global appreciation for historical sites, that concerted efforts for the wall's preservation truly began. You see the first stirrings of academic interest, the initial photography, and the very beginnings of modern conservation work. It's a transition from a functional structure to a cherished historical icon. You've just witnessed the Great Wall's gradual decline in strategic importance during the Qing dynasty, as it slowly transformed from a military defense into a silent, decaying landmark. Now, in the final leg of our journey, you glide into the modern era, observing the wall's remarkable transformation into a modern interpretation, symbol of peace. This is where the story shifts from its functional past to its enduring, universal meaning. Imagine the dawn of the 20th century, and then into the 21st. The world has changed dramatically. China itself has undergone immense transformations. The Great Wall, once a border, a fortress, a symbol of division, begins to take on a new, profound identity. It's no longer about keeping people out. It's about inviting people in, about sharing a piece of human history. You see not soldiers, but tourists from every corner of the globe, walking along its restored sections, marveling at its scale. It's like a giant, open-air museum dedicated to human perseverance. The concerted efforts for preservation and restoration truly ramp up. You see archaeologists carefully excavating, historians meticulously studying, and conservationists working to stabilize and protect crumbling sections. Governments invest significant resources, not for military purposes, but for cultural heritage. Sections that were once overgrown with vegetation are cleared, bricks are meticulously repaired or replaced, and pathways are made safe for visitors. There's a quiet dedication to ensuring this monumental achievement survives for future generations. The wall, perhaps ironically, becomes a bridge. It's a focal point for international cooperation, attracting scholars, engineers, and tourists from around the world. It inspires art, literature, and films, often depicting it in ways that transcend its original defensive purpose. It serves as a backdrop for marathons, cultural festivals, and even diplomatic events. This transformation from a symbol of martial defense to a symbol of global connection is one of the most remarkable aspects of its modern story. Historians still argue whether the modern emphasis on the Great Wall as a symbol of peace truly reflects its complex and often violent historical context, or if it's a necessary reinterpretation for a globalized world. Is it accurate history or aspirational messaging? The daily life around the wall is now centered on its role as a tourist attraction and a protected site. You see local communities benefiting from tourism, offering guides, selling souvenirs, and providing services. The quiet hum of ancient construction has been replaced by the chatter of diverse languages, the click of cameras, and the footsteps of millions of visitors experiencing a shared human heritage. A quirky tidbit from the modern era is the often repeated myth that the Great Wall is visible from space with the naked eye. While it's a romantic notion, astronauts and scientists have largely debunked it, proving that while it's an incredible structure, it blends too well with its surroundings to be easily seen from orbit without aid. It's a reminder that even the most impressive feats of engineering can be overshadowed by urban sprawl or just a bit of cloud cover. As you stand on a restored section of the wall, looking out at the endless undulations of stone and earth, you feel a sense of profound continuity. This structure, built over millennia through countless individual, peaceful efforts of construction, now stands not as a barrier to keep out, but as an open invitation. It's a global icon, a testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and the enduring capacity to build something grand and lasting. It represents the quiet strength of persistent endeavor, a powerful symbol of humanity's ability to create, to connect, and ultimately to define itself. You drift slowly, the ancient stones beneath your feet blurring into the quiet darkness. The whispers of centuries fade, the echoes of hammers and the murmurs of voices receding like a tide. You feel the cool night air, hear the gentle rustle of leaves, and the soft, rhythmic hum of your fan. The grand scale of the wall, once so overwhelming, now settles into a comforting sense of permanence, a silent guardian watching over time itself. Its story, one of quiet, persistent building, of peace found in demarcation, now wraps around you like a soft blanket. Let the images drift, the facts settle, and the gentle rhythm of history lull you into a deep, peaceful sleep. Sweet dreams.